So unless you guys have been living under a rock, this year's Australian Open men's tournament has been a little bit different to what is normally the case. And that's to do with all the uncertainties surrounding Novak Djokovic and his visa and whether he can actually play in Australia or not. But because of the situation and Novak, Minister Alex Hawke, the judges and the whole situation, this presented a very juicy arbitrage opportunity for bettors out there. Most arbitrage opportunities out there are generally only about 2 to 3%, but this one was about 10 to 20%. And in this video, I'll be going over how this arbitrage opportunity came about and all the details behind this arbitrage opportunity and some of the key takeaways and lessons that you guys can learn from this experience and use for your own betting in the future. So this opportunity was a very unique situation and occurred in the 2022 Australian Open men's winner market on Betfair, which we can see over here, Australian Open men's winner. And it's for the outright winner, so not for any individual games, it's for the winner of the whole entire tournament. So the main unique situation was, and the catalyst behind it, was the uncertainty around whether Novak Djokovic, the world number one and favourite for the tournament, was actually going to be playing or not because of his vaccination status and because he had actually already been let into Australia. On the 13th of January, Thursday, so 4 days before the tournament started, that was after Novak Djokovic had just won his court case, the first one, and now it was just before Minister Hawke was about to cancel his visa for the second time. So to understand this opportunity, first we need to understand the Betfair exchange and what is also implied probability. So Betfair is essentially just like a stock market. We can choose to back players, which is in this column here, or we can choose to lay, which means bet against players in this column here. And we can choose the prices ourselves. We don't need to be using the given prices, but we just put in orders, and if they match across to someone else who's also putting in orders, then it gets filled and we would essentially trade against them. For example, I traded here, Daniil Medvedev, I backed him at 3.32 on average. Someone was willing to bet against Medvedev at odds of 3.32 and that incurred a trade, and the size or the amount of that was $1,950. So for the backing odds, this is just like any other normal bookmaker, and we can work out from this the implied probability of that event happening. So the implied probability for Daniil Medvedev to win is, at the moment, 1 over the average of 2.84 and 2.88, so 2.86, and that gives us about 34.96% or about 35%. So it's saying that Medvedev has a roughly 35% chance of winning. And the neat trick about using these implied probabilities is we can work out and find arbitrage opportunities from them. If we sum up the implied probabilities of all the back column in here, all the way down to every single player who's in the market, that has to be greater than 100% in total. Otherwise, there exists an arbitrage opportunity where we can back all these players, all of them, and be guaranteed a profit no matter who wins. Now for the lay column, the sum of the implied probability has to be less than 100%. As you can see here, it's currently 93.4. And if it was greater than 100%, then in most cases, there would be an arbitrage opportunity where you can bet against every single player and be guaranteed a profit no matter who wins in the end. Now, for a more detailed explanation, I recommend you check out my previous video on purely arbitrage betting, and you can find out more about what implied probability is and some more basic calculations and examples over there. So now let's get into the juicy stuff of this arbitrage opportunity. So I've taken a screenshot of the market or of the first few players, what it was like on Thursday, the 13th of January. Now, this was when Djokovic had just won his first visa fight against the border security, and now it was just before the minister was about to announce that he was going to cancel Djokovic's visa for the second time. So here we can see that the total implied probability is 115%. And for the backside, that's for the backside, and for the lay side, it's 98.9. So this is less than 100, which is what it's supposed to be. This is greater than 100, which is what it's supposed to be. So at first glance, there isn't actually an arbitrage opportunity here at all. There's no opportunity in the market to get an arbitrage. But here's when the tournament rules get interesting. And you can also see that I've kind of worked out here. So for Novak, the implied probability at the time when I was checking it, here's odds of 3.05. So the implied probability was 1 divided by 3.05, or 32%. Medvedev was 30.3 based on his back odds, and I've worked out for everyone. And in total, I got 119. 112 was the total percentage. Yeah, that also confirms that since it's greater than 100, there isn't actually an arbitrage opportunity. Or so it seems like it. But here's where it gets interesting. And if you go to the winner's market, for example here, we can see a little icon called rules. And most people do not read these rules, which is very dangerous if you do not read the rules. But it states, if a player does not start a tournament, then all bets on that player will be void. Qualifying is not considered part of a tournament. This means, or this is what I interpret it as, if Djokovic doesn't play the first game of the tournament, so he's either deported or he's withdrawn from Tennis Australia because of his visa situation or whatever, which was seeming highly likely, then it means he does not start the tournament, and all bets on that player will be void. So all bets on Djokovic will be void. And a void bet means that bet is refunded entirely. So if I bet $1,000 on Djokovic at whatever odds, if he doesn't play, I get my $1,000 back, and that's the end of it. So this is just like in horse racing, where for the horse races, if there's a horse that at the start of the race it gets injured or something and it can't run, then that horse is removed, and any bets you placed or bet against that horse are just scrapped, and all your stake is just returned to you, and basically it's as if nothing happened at all. This just helps to like keep everything fair. You wouldn't feel like great if your horse that was the favorite and it just, instead of not, it doesn't even run, it just doesn't even participate in the race. You'd feel like you'd just been cheated of your money. So it's just to help keep everything fair. The bet is refunded and nothing happens. However, for normal races, let's say go to an example. Let's just take a look at the race here at Chepstow. If, for example, Mayhem Mia is removed, then the odds of all the other horses, since Mayhem Mia is the favorite here, if this horse is removed, then the odds for Twilight Glory, Jens Georgie, and all these other horses, the odds will go down because they're now stronger. Since the favorite is removed, it's more likely that these horses will actually win. And we can see this, there's a statement in the rules where, so for non-runners, basically what this stuff says, if a horse doesn't run, then the odds will change, and it basically reduces the odds that you get accordingly, because now your horse has a much higher chance of winning. So the odds should, in fairness, get reduced for the person who bet against that horse, which helps to keep everything fair. But since this market for the tennis, the Australian Open men's tournament, the outright winner market is not actually a horse race event. It's actually just the normal winner market for a sport event. There is no such thing as reduction factor. And this is what is confusing to most people. This is the big difference, and this is why the opportunity existed. So what this means, if we go back to what we had here, if I bet on Novak Djokovic at about 2.98 odds, let's say I bet $1,000 on him, and let's say I bet $1,000 on Medvedev. if Novak Djokovic can't play, my $1,000 from betting on Djokovic gets fully refunded. So I lose nothing here. So my P&L is 0 from my Djokovic bet. But once Novak Djokovic is removed, it means Medvedev is much more likely now to win the entire tournament. And his odds are going to go down. So I had $1,000 backing him at 3.2, for example. Now his odds have gone down probably to like 2.7. And once that happens, I can now bet against Medvedev at 2.7 odds, and I can guarantee a profit that way. It's basically like buying low by backing at high odds and selling high, which is betting against or laying or selling at low odds. So that's where the arbitrage opportunity is. And you can roughly expect, since Djokovic has about 30% of the implied probability, then it's going to significantly affect the market. Since he's such a big influence on the odds of other players, it will swing it dramatically since Novak is such a strong player. So let's say we have the same bet, 1,000 on Djokovic, 1,000 on Medvedev. So if Djokovic does play, then here you need to know a bit more about tennis, but his odds would probably decrease to about 2.5, and Medvedev might increase to about 3.5. So one goes up, you gain, one goes down, you gain, you lose. So in the end, you don't lose anything at all. But this means you don't make any money. If you make nothing if Djokovic plays, then that's not good. So we want to still make money if Djokovic plays. And here's how we do it. We bet more on Djokovic than we do on the other players. So we could bet 2,000 on Djokovic and 1,000 on Medvedev. Then when Djokovic is confirmed to be playing, his odds go down because he's such a strong favorite, and his normally odds are about 2.5. And Medvedev's odds will go up, which means we lose money here, but we gain money here. So that means, since we bet more on Djokovic, we're going to make more money than we are losing money on Medvedev or the other players. So now here's the mathematics of why this arbitrage opportunity actually exists. So we said that if the total implied probability is less than 100% on the backside, then there's an arbitrage. Now, if Novak doesn't play, then this 105.7% or 112% that I calculated earlier is significantly reduced, since he's about 33% of the implied probability. And if we work that out, we can see, so Djokovic is 32.79 or about 33%. The total I worked out for the total implied probability was 112.78%. Without Djokovic, that's only 80%. So if Djokovic doesn't play, we can get an arbitrage by betting on all the other players. But it's not kind of worth it to do that, because there is also all these other players at 1,000 odds, which we can kind of see at the bottom. So all these players who actually really don't have any chance of pretty much winning, they're still counted as 0.01%, because that is the maximum size. 1,000 are the highest odds that can be possibly offered on Betfair. But these are probably closer to like 10,000 or something, like maybe even 1 million for the players who have like no chance. But that still has to count in the implied probability. So we can get rid of that and say that was 8.7%. We can say that was only, instead of actually 0.01%, 0.1% for each person, we can say that was only 3% in total. That means we have a huge edge now. 74% is the total implied probability. That means we're getting a 26% arbitrage opportunity. if Novak doesn't play. And but it's still a bit hard to back all these players with like 900 something odds, 600 something odds. There's not much point. So what we can do is back the few strongest players where the odds are going to have the most impact once Novak is removed from the fair market. So this would be Medvedev for sure, Zverev, Rafael Nadal. Here's where you need to know a bit about tennis. Medvedev is on the other side of the draw, but he will likely is a second favorite, so he should firm up to be even more a favorite, as he will likely face Djokovic in the final. Zverev and Rafa will face Djokovic potentially in the semis. They have an easier route now once they get into the semis against an easier opponent, so their odds should also drop. And another one is actually Rublev, because if Djokovic is removed, Rublev will take his spot in the draw, and Djokovic's draw is a lot easier than what he's in currently, so his odds will also drop. So these players, these three, plus also Tsitsipas and Rublev, will likely have the most impact. So these are the people we are going to bet on. So what I ended up doing was I used this column to work out how much I was going to back on each of these players, including Djokovic, because remember, if Djokovic ends up staying, his odds are going to go down, and we're going to be losing money on the other players like Medvedev, Zverev, Rafa, Tsitsipas and Rublev. So that's why we need Novak. We still need to bet on Novak to offset the losses and still make money once the other players' prices go down. Here I wanted to work out how much we should bet on each player. We want the payout to be roughly the same. So I can bet, let's say $2,000 on Djokovic. The payout's going to be $6,000. So I need something appropriate for Medvedev. I might do 1,800. So that's also close to 6,000. Do 1,850. So that's close enough. For Zverev, I might do maybe 1,100. 1140, 1150, so that's close to 6,100. For Rafa, I might do 400, maybe 450, 420, 440, yeah, about 440 for Rafa. And for Tsitsipas, because its odds are so high, we only need about 145. And Rublev, because his odds are even higher, we only need about 90. So that would be the amount we bet on each of these players. And you can see from my screenshots later what I've done. And I've done something similar to the amount I said I would kind of from here. But what I've done is, we go back to Australian Open men's winner. On Medvedev, I put 1950. On Zverev, I put 1080. On Nadal, I put 200. Plus, I have another 200 bonus bets on my bookmakers account. And Tsitsipas I did 120. Rublev, I went a bit more at 187, but that's because I thought it was a better opportunity. So this is like kind of what I actually did, which was at 3.05 odds, I put 1,700 on Djokovic, 1,550 on Medvedev to keep the payoffs roughly the same. Zverev I had 975, Rafa had 200 plus some bonus bets, Tsitsipas had 120, and Rublev I also had 120. Now what happened after? Djokovic got removed from the market. So you see Djokovic here, but now in the actual one, Novak Djokovic is gone. Daniil Medvedev is the only one, or the only favorite now, still remaining, followed by now Zverev. So what happened was I got Medvedev at average odds of 3.32, Zverev's was 5.3, Nadal was 14.5, Tsitsipas and Rublev's are here. And the moment Djokovic got confirmed he was removed from the market, this was the outcome of the event that I was banking on. and Djokovic got removed from the market, so he's now out, which means we've now hit our 75%, and that can't happen, which means there's an arbitrage. So arbitrage bettors will keep backing until the odds of all these players now shifts back down, and that was what happened once Djokovic got removed. And since these players are now more likely to win because of no Djokovic, their odds dramatically went down. So Medvedev's now 2.84 instead of 3.32. Zverev is 4.8 rather than 5.3. Nadal's half, 7.2 instead of 14.5. And Tsitsipas and Rublev have also gone down a little bit. And we can see the consequence of this. So the moment that Djokovic was removed, I got refunded the amount I had in Djokovic, and now I can cash out or trade out of my position. So now, at first I bought these futures on Medvedev, Zverev, Nadal, Tsitsipas, Rublev at low prices relatively because their odds were so high. High odds means a lower price. And now I can sell out of these. So I bought them to cheap, now I can sell them for high. And I can accept the profit, as shown here, of 737. Now it has gone down a little bit to 630, but that's because the market's not too liquid at the moment. There's not many people in there, and it means I have to pay a bit extra to trade out. But I can trade out manually and probably get about $700 or so. So that was the outcome of the arbitrage opportunity. I put in about $5,000 for $700 of profit. That's about 14-15%, which is pretty solid, and you're not going to find this very commonly. And there was also no size restriction for this, so you could bet as much as you wanted, but I only put in 5,000 because that was how much I had in the bank at the moment, but you could have put in a lot more. So you can see what I've kind of done already. I've bought Medvedev at 3.32 odds, which is quite, the higher odds means it's a cheaper price. And I've sold Medvedev at 2.85 odds, so lower odds, more expensive. It's kind of counterintuitive because it's the opposite of what it seems, but it's the other way around. And I backed them at high odds, and I bet against them at low odds. So I traded out of Rafa at 11, so that wasn't too great. And Tsitsipas, I've got him in at 44, and I bet against him at 29. So all these players shifted in my favor, and in the end, I can cash out now for 634, which means just betting on these players accordingly, and in the end, no matter who wins, I can make $634 in profit. So in the other outcome, when Djokovic is not deported, then I'll have good odds on Djokovic and I can trade out there. I would have backed him for about 3. I can bet against him for about 2.5 probably, and I'll lose a bit on the other players, but overall, since I bet a lot more on Djokovic, it would offset my losses that I make on the other players. So now, why was this opportunity possible, and what are some key takeaways we can get out of this? And this is going to be, now the Djokovic opportunity is obviously gone now since he's no longer in the country. The tournament's also started, so there's no opportunity here. But what can we learn from this to be able to find these opportunities ourselves in the future? So the first most important thing is reading the rules properly. You have to read the rules of the market. You have to know what it means by if a player does not start a tournament, then all bets on that are void. It means if you bet on Djokovic, it gets refunded. If he doesn't play, it doesn't mean he settles as a loser. So for example, when people thought, well, the minister's just cancelled his visa a second time, his odds should not be changing at all. His odds should be his odds assuming that he plays. Otherwise, it's just a mistake and you're getting in at the wrong price. So that's why Betfair is very dangerous. The odds are not very clear, And I've made mistakes before in the past when I haven't read the rules carefully. I'm guilty of this myself. And it was only from my experience in horse betting that I kind of knew that if a horse doesn't run, the bets get avoided. So I thought it might be the same for Djokovic, and I was glad I checked and confirmed that it was. And it also didn't say anything. The difference was there was no reduction factor, which created this arbitrage opportunity. If people aren't familiar with the betting markets, they don't know the rules, then they're going to get completely obliterated. Secondly, you might also want to understand a bit about the sport itself. If something doesn't seem right, you can know a bit more easily. If you don't know anything about tennis, you don't even know who Djokovic is, you might see him at 3 odds. You think, okay, he's the favorite, but that's about him. But you want to be knowing that if you've been watching tennis for a while, you know he's in very good form. He was in the final of the US Opens and he won 3 Grand Slams last year. So his fair odds from normally in the Australian Open on a hard court is a lot less than 3. So something didn't feel quite right there. Thirdly, you want to also understand what you're exposed to and what outcomes you are hoping to achieve and what position your bets are putting you into. So for example, if I didn't bet on Djokovic at all, I only bet on Medvedev, Zverev, Rafa, Tsitsipas, Rublev, then I am very exposed, negatively exposed to the fact that if Djokovic does play, I'm going to get completely destroyed because all these odds are going to shoot up and now I have to sell out at a lower price. I backed them at low odds and now I'm betting against them at high odds if I don't want to cash out, if I don't want to ride the risk, which means I'm going to be losing quite a bit of money. But that's why you have to realize by betting on Djokovic that offsets that risk and you can back more on him because he's going to get refunded anyways and you're going to be making money either way. Also, you still have to think creatively outside the box about what could possibly happen, even though it might seem like an arbitrage opportunity. Generally, in most cases, if an opportunity seems too good to be true, it is. So even for this one, where I was like checking the maths for a few hours, I still wasn't 100% certain that this was an arbitrage. And the reasoning for that is, what am I still exposed to? You've got to think, what could possibly go wrong? And that is, again, in the rules. Any player starting a tournament but withdrawing or being disqualified before the end will be settled as a loser. So how does this affect me? If I bet 2,000 on Djokovic, he plays the first game, while the court situation and discussions are going on about his visa situation, and then after that, it's determined that Djokovic needs to leave the country and he gets disqualified or withdrawn from the tournament. But after he's played the first game, then it'll be settled as a loser. I'm not going to get my refund on Djokovic. And I could potentially lose everything that I bet on him, which is quite a lot of money. Secondly, while the rules don't specifically state anything about a reduction factor, it might also be introduced. You never want to just assume that the rules that aren't there are going to be what you want. So that was still something I was exposed to. And that's why even though this was a guaranteed 10%, it wasn't 100% guaranteed, it was probably, I would say, 99.5%. That's why I wouldn't put all my life savings into just this. Finally, again, the last thing is you want to be very confident with the maths around betting. You need to understand implied probabilities and what this 114.5%, 95% actually mean. And you can see that I spend a lot of time working out the implied probability for backing and working out how much I could get if Djokovic didn't play. So if this was still over 100 after Djokovic, then it's not an arbitrage. And you need to be able to work that out on the spot, either using Excel or some mathematical models and a calculator. So hopefully that gives you some insight into this specific arbitrage opportunity that was found in the Australian Open men's tournament winner market and the whole thing surrounding Djokovic and how that presented an opportunity in the betting markets. Hopefully you guys learned something you can take away for your own betting. Make sure to like and subscribe if you found this interesting, and I'll see you guys in the next video.